Welcome to the S.O.A.P.
Hey guys, welcome to the S.O.A.P. Me, Mike, you've got Aaron, you've got Arthur. We're going to be talking about a couple of things tonight. Started off with Arthur. What do you got?
Oh, I'm going first, am I?
Well, why not?
Yeah, now.
Yep.
Apparently.
Do it.
Alright, well, I guess I'll be talking about my obsession, apparently, because we had a request for me to do some board game reviews. I don't really want to do reviews because A, I'm probably terrible at reviews, and B, because I don't think that's particularly valuable at the moment, because chances are the one person that has requested it, I don't think they've actually played many things, so it's probably best to just do kind of general introduction. So
Yeah,
I'll
do a general introduction.
I'll do a
Introduce
parent
them.
introduction
Yeah.
to the world of board games as it currently stands, and essentially talk about some of the parent categories and the popular categories of board games that exist. Maybe some recommendations, but maybe not, because I don't want you to go spending money.
Question, what is a parent thingy?
So a parent, the way I'm defining it is pretty much the meaning of the board game, like the type of board game it is.
Okay.
The board games are kind of split into a few, in my view, families of types and styles. And I'll add in a couple of extra definitions.
And I'll add in a couple of questions as well.
I'm sure you would.
Yes.
So to get things rolling, I'll say that currently it's pretty fucking good time to get into board games if you're going to do it. Many people are kind of looking at this and almost thinking, is this going to be like a golden age? Or like seen as a golden age? Because the hobby's been growing very, very, very quickly over the last probably 3-4 years. I only really got into it properly 3 years ago. And since then, even since I started, it's ballooned. It's probably tripled in size.
Is that due to people being able to do stuff like with computer-wise, like they can pump out a rule system and stuff like that?
No, it's not that. It's hard to say exactly what's causing it. It's just one of those things where it just keeps growing.
Yeah.
A lot of people think it's the death of gaming in the sphere of like where you pick up the 64 and play split screen with your friends, and they're trying, because that sort of kind of died and nearly all multiplayer gaming now is online, to get that feel of hanging out with a bunch of your friends, having a few beers. Board games are sort of taking over that.
Okay. They came back, you could say they came back.
Yeah. They were popular, but they've grown in particular things like quality and the amount of money people are willing to chuck into them. So as an example, Kickstarter is full of board games, and board games and tabletop games are one of its most successful categories by a huge
Now,
margin.
for people at home, Kickstarter is a funding site, correct?
Yeah, it's a crowdfunding site. So the idea is you put an idea on, preferably a fully fleshed out idea. Otherwise, you'll end up on the horror show Kickstarter lists. And people will back you at certain levels.
So you can search for board games, you can go, type in board games, and up comes a million and one.
Yeah, so you go to the tabletop categories, and they tend to be they're very fleshed out. I mean, nowadays in particular, they're run by big publishers, not so much little dudes. But occasionally you will see someone small pop up and they'll do really well with it. But as an example, so Kingdom Death Monster, which was kickstarted earlier this year as a second run, so this is a reprint, made I want to say almost 11 million as the board game Kickstarter. Now the board game, that particular one, is quite highly priced. There's a lot of miniatures and the whole shtick to it. It's like even the base copy of the game is $200 US or $250 US on the Kickstarter, whereas the retail value is $400.
For a board game?
Yeah.
Wow.
Holy mackerel!
Now
That is a lot of money.
that's the base set, and the full set. So if you wanted to buy all the expansions, it was $1,699. So $1,699.
Tell him he's dreaming.
Does it come with miniatures or anything, or? Does it have miniatures or like extras?
Yeah, it's a ton of miniatures.
Oh, okay, so that softens the blow a little bit, but still.
Yeah. The miniatures are gorgeous. It's not anything I would recommend anyone to pick up as a first game, but it's really just an example of how far it sort of has come. And if you look at Kickstarter, at the moment, Rising Sun, which is a Kickstarter by Cool Mini or not.
Yes, you tried to get me into that, and I won't do it.
Yeah, it is expensive because again, it's one of those games with miniatures. That's not to say they all have miniatures, but that's a big selling point. A lot of people will buy these because they have miniatures.
Yes, this is true.
And not necessarily because the game is the best ever. But
yes, this is true.
the point is, it's a growing hobby, and it will continue to grow probably for the time being. I'm sure eventually it'll slow down, but at this point, it's a good time to get into it. There's freaking tons of shit out there, so which is good. So, out of that,
I did tell you I bought the Doom game, right?
Yeah, you showed it.
Yeah.
I was like, yes, I want to play this.
You need to wear gold, undies and look like Sting to play it, or is that reference a bit too meta?
No, Doom, not Doom.
Oh, Doom.
Yeah.
As in, okay, not
As
Doom.
in Doom, the first-person shooter Doom.
Well, I'd play either, actually. Probably not with the gold undies though.
I need to watch that movie.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
It took me a while to realize what the hell you're on about. I'm like, golden undies?
Yeah.
Because Sting, and he was a bad guy or something. Right?
Yeah.
No, I remember, but
the David Lynch film. A lot of people do sort of try not to remember it. It was... Yeah.
I don't think it's as bad as people say.
No, it's not. But it's... Yeah, that Sting character. Anyway, we're digressing.
Heavily digressing. I mean, my point really is that it's a good time to get into the hobby.
Mm-hmm.
And it's rising, it's... if you're going to do it now. Might as well.
Okay. Well, what's out there at the moment?
There's a lot. So... I guess the first thing I'll say is that, I'll talk about the categories the way I define it. So two of them are pretty well known, and there's a few that I kind of split into their own categories. So this is think of these as the parent. So it's sort of like genres, in the same way that thriller,
action,
adventure, romantic comedy. That's really the differentiation. And at the moment, the other thing with these categories is a popular trend to combine and smash them together to come out with these sort of combo games that have the strengths of both, theoretically. Sometimes they fuck up both, and they just end up with a bad game. But sometimes they do really well, and I'll talk about those a little bit. So, the first two main categories, the one you probably see the most, is Euro games and American style, or more popularly, Ameritrash. So it's not Ameritrash in the sense. Yeah.
Can you define those two terms, please?
Yeah. So Euro games came out from the 70s, pretty much, and they normally define a genre which is normally relatively simple rules. Normally, very little randomization, and they're normally kind of dry to some extent, but they're kind of about scoring points. They're really about optimization. So normally the game is built around some kind of engine and mechanics, where the mechanics take precedent over the theme. So the themes in Euro games tend to be things like medieval towns, building cathedrals, something about oil, economic themes, things of that nature.
So, for example, in a board game, which one would be classified as that?
Okay, so probably one of the more popular ones at the moment is Splendor, which is pretty dry. It's a tableau building game where you are trying to win cards by swapping gems, which are basically look like poker chips, and then you collect them, and then you not submit them, but you hand them in essentially, and you then pick up cards that score you points. And there's a whole bunch of rows of cards depending on how many players, and it's basically getting this points engine running is kind of the appeal of the game. And that's what a lot of these games are. They can range, Splendor is a very simple game, but it can range all the way to something like Madeira, which is very complicated. If you look at the board, it looks like there's a bunch of shit. Someone just vomited a whole bunch of random shit, and you look at it and go, what the hell am I looking at? What do I do? Where do I even start? However, that's an illusion. The game is actually relatively simple once you understand the basic mechanics. The other thing with Euro games, they tend to be shorter, as they're about optimizing your points engine and having a bit of fun. That's kind of the point. Another Ameritrash is the counterpoint. So the reason why it's called Ameritrash is because it was popularized in America, and that's all where the complete opposite approach. So the games normally have much more randomization. So things like dice rolling, they're much more story-based. They're normally the ones that'll have the miniatures, and then normally the ones that are the longer games. That's not always the case, but by and large, Ameritrash playtime is a lot longer. So as an example would be something like Eldritch Horror, which is a Cthulhu-based game where you are trying to prevent... It's a cooperative game where you're trying to prevent the rise of the Elder Gods from destroying the world, pretty much. And it's got a lot of random mechanics and dice rolls and things like that. Doom, which is what Mike has already mentioned, is kind of in that category as well.
Doom.
So, really briefly, how does that play?
No idea.
Have you played it yet?
No, I wanted it for the models.
Oh. Is it like a... Do you go round the board and... does it look like you go around the board?
He has no idea because
Alright, keep talking, Arthur, and I'll Google the Doom game. Hang on.
It looks like it's like a Space Hulk game, I think, where you have
it's like a dungeon crawler.
Yeah. I guess
you're a bunch of dudes and you shoot the guys coming at you. So like Space Hulk was back in the day, where you're like a bunch of Marines in the corridor, that sort of thing. And that's oftentimes Dungeon Crawlers is another big one in this category.
Like you good old Talisman and...
Yeah, Talisman and Descent 2.0 and all its myriad of expansions.
What about XCOM? XCOM?
Yeah. I think XCOM's a bit more of a hybrid, but it's definitely closer to Ameritrash. Normally the big thing is story and theme. That's what they're going for. They want you to feel like you belong to a universe. But subsequently, some people hate them because of the randomness and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And for me, a lot of people lump this next category into one of those. I wouldn't think so. I think it's their own category. It's essentially war games. So I would even split those into two. So there's miniature war games.
Yeah.
Things like Warhammer, War Machine, etc. And there's also traditional war games. So traditional war games are board games. They're normally very niche. It's a seriously niche market within already what is kind of a niche market. So
is that like the Risk games?
No, Risk aren't really war games. They kind of are the beginning of that, but Risk are what you'd probably call a traditional board game.
Right.
But there's too much randomization. It's not quite complex enough for most probably war gamers to classify it as a war game. Something that's like Risk that probably is familiar to people is Axis and Allies.
Aye.
That one is, because it has that already level of complexity.
Right. So that's a war game.
Yes.
Right.
And there's only really a few companies that manufacture war games, and they again range. There's very light war games. Like, for instance, an almost hybrid war game / American style, or Ameritrash, is called Battle Law 2.0. And that's kind of almost a hybrid between traditional war game, miniature war games, because it has minis in it, and an Ameritrash game, where you have two simple battlefield, but the mechanics are relatively simple. Like, you move your guys up a grid, and then you use cards to activate certain guys in certain orders, and you roll dice to see what happens.
Just a little bit of everything.
Yeah. And then on the fucking far other end of the scale, if you want to get what's called Chrome, and Chrome is what wargamers call realism, pretty much, you can get something like Rommel Battle for North Africa, which is... The playtime is listed on Board Game Geek, which I'll talk about as well, 60,000 minutes. because it's played in real time as the whole campaign expands. That's the other end of the scale. Most people are somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
But it's almost a category on their own. There's a lot of stuff in there, and there's a few hybrids that I'll mention as well. Miniature war games, as I said, again, that's the difference between miniature war games and traditional war games is that traditional war games you'll have a board and it's all inbuilt in a box. You take it out, the components are generally speaking less high quality because it's a niche market. And you basically fold them out and you play. Miniature war games, really they're there to sell the miniatures, and the game is there as well to get you interested in buying more miniatures and hopefully get involved in the community. But the selling point of those is rule complexity and how nice you can make your models look. So again, it's something like Warhammer, which is ridiculously expensive, or War Machine, or Hordes, which is part of the same universe, and there's tons of others. There's things like Guild Ball, and Infinity, and Malifaux, and
Wild West,
Red
Exodus,
Zone, and there's tons
Doom,
of them.
and Terminator, and the Master Tags. I could go rattle on.
What about Blood Bowl? Where would that come in?
That would be a miniatures.
It's a miniature as well. It's
Yeah,
not really
it
a
is
war
a bit
game,
more-
though, is it? It's a sporty.
No. Yeah, it's a miniatures game, but the difference with Blood Bowl... Well, Blood Bowl used to be a pure miniatures game, but the new edition that they came out with recently was a board game through and through.
Okay.
Like,
They're trying to make a bit more board games from the Games Workshop side.
yeah, G-Dub has a lot of licenses that they will be reverting. So one popular game from Fantasy Flight, which is the original publisher who worked with GW, so G-Dub Games Workshop, they released Fury of Dracula, which is I have the 3rd edition of, but they've license reverted back to G-Dub, which was originally theirs back in the 80s. It's an old game.
And you have it.
Yeah, we'll have the 3rd edition.
Crikey.
which is very
And Conquest, is that the game you were playing before? The 40k theme?
You mean Forbidden Stars?
Forbidden Stars.
Yeah, so that's also a Fantasy Flight using the Games Workshop license.
Yeah.
Although that's their own design game. It's actually somewhat based on StarCraft, the board game, funnily enough, which makes it extra funny. Because the joke is StarCraft, the video game, meaning
Based off.
based on 40k.
Yeah.
So kind of went backwards.
It's a circle of life.
The lion eats the pony. Why did I say pony?
Gazelle! Come on, it's the gazelle!
It has hooves. I don't know.
Anyway, so what else? What other genres are there?
That's probably the big ones. Really, you'd probably shove most games out there into one of those. But the other probably big genre that I would split away would be social games or party games. So these are something like the Resistance or the traditional Mafia or Werewolf, where normally a whole lot of people play them, and they would be the actual game. The gameplay comes from interaction between real people. So it's really most of these games work on some principle of lying to your friends, where someone has some hidden information and some people don't, and figuring out who has it and who's the fucktard, who's the person that's been lying to your face and pretending that they're your best friend for 5 minutes. That's the strength of the game, is that sort of stuff. So as an example, the Resistance is probably my favorite of that genre, where you have anywhere between 5 and 10 people. You're all playing the Resistance trying to kill, well, basically, it's a revolution against the government, so theoretically. But some people within the Resistance are spies for the government. The spies know who they are, the Resistance doesn't, and the game encourages you to figure out. And you go on missions, and if the missions fail, because a spy went on it, you lose the game. If they succeed, then the Resistance wins, and the spies lose. But really, it's really a reason to lie to your friends and to accuse them of being liars. And, oh, you sneezed, and therefore you're a spy. There's no rhyme or reason. Just accuse everyone and hope it works.
Yeah, good.
So yeah,
What a lovely friendship-building game. Yes, yes.
All right,
it's a lot of fun if you like that sort of stuff.
I'm gonna ask a question, maybe showing my noobness. I don't play a great deal of board games, and the board games I would play are probably your traditionals, your Monopolies and things like that, which are very mainstream sort of board games. But what about card games? Where do they fall? Would you call them a board game? As they're social in nature?
Well, I think board gamers will shove card games into the board game category.
Okay.
But
they
are almost in their own field as well. But in practice, because they kind of can be fit into those categories depending on the card games.
Yeah.
So traditional card games will often fit into Euro. But there's also card games that are story-based, that are things like story-based deck builders, for instance. Something like Aeon's End, which came out fairly recently. Came out last year, I think. The game is essentially a dungeon crawler, but it's just a card game in card game form. We have a card boss, and you build a deck to try and fight the boss off. It's a cooperative game where everyone is building a deck and activating their cards to kill the boss before he can activate and basically murder all of you. Okay. But it is essentially just a card game. It only uses cards. There's no other mechanism.
Well, because it's similar when you were talking about the Resistance game there with the spies and stuff. Not exactly the same, but the whole lying to your friends concept and stuff. Games like Munchkin and all its expansions were really good at that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And narrative, but not really story driven. It was more who could be the biggest ass and do the best deals. So yeah, it's like so you'd certainly look at some card games like your straight card games like Magic or what else, like Adventure Time's got the Card Wars game out now as well, which me and my son play a fair bit. They're a straight card battler, so I wouldn't say they're such a board game type of card game, but then you've got your other end of the spectrum like your Munchkins and things like that where it's more story driven.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the point. Like, even card games tend to fit into those categories a little bit. And there's actually card games that are war games. There's card games that are Euro games, like something like Seven Wonders. And there's card games that are social games, where you might get a card that's simply representing who your secret character is. But ostensibly, all you're doing is playing cards. So it depends on how you want to define it. I tend to just shove them in with some of those categories, but anything that maybe is a traditional 52 deck type game, but we're probably not really talking about those just when I think of board games, I guess I almost take out traditional 52 card games.
Yeah, well,
entirely out of it. Like, I don't even think about it.
No, but I mean, if you're going to buy a card game, it's not, you're not going to a specialty shop or online to buy a deck of cards to play, euchre or hearts or whatever. You're going to buy a deck game and get expansion packs and play it in a social manner, I guess. So it would be completely different. I wouldn't lump a 52 game in with board games at all. They're their own sort of card numbers games, aren't they?
Yeah. And there's also like card games that are combo kind of both. Something like Jaipur, which uses both card and board kind of mechanisms. And there's card games that use the cards as a board.
Okay.
So you just lay out the cards, but that acts as a board. And the reason why they provide on cards is to really make the game easier to transport, pretty much.
Add another element of randomness, I guess, or would it be a set layout, or would the cards determine how the layout's going to go when you shuffle up?
Depends on the game.
It depends on the game, I guess.
Some have a set. Some have a set way to set it up. Some will have randomization. Nearly all games have some level of randomization. Even the Euro games have randomization. Part of the reason for that is because randomization adds. Otherwise, if you don't have randomization, you run into the problem where the game is too easy to solve.
And it's the same game every time you play it.
Yeah. So it limits replayability, and there's all sorts of reasons for it. Good game designers will use it correctly. Bad game designers won't. to put it really simply.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying there. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So as far as recommendations for purchase, it's really hard because a lot of these games also range heavily in cost.
Mm-hmm.
Card games, generally speaking, are very expensive. Even with Australia tax, you're probably looking at about $20-$25.
That's on Steam. That's on Steam, or that's a board game. What am I talking about? That's okay in the shops, of course.
Edit out Mike's interjection.
Yeah.
And Mike,
I was like,
what?
$25. That's he always goes on about Steam.
And you can go the other end, like I said earlier, with Kingdom Death Monster, which is the base game retails for $400. But let's say hypothetically you wanted to buy every single expansion with it, you'd be looking at over $2,000.
It's a lot of money for a board game.
Yeah.
You really
You don't have to do that.
Yeah.
But that's the point. So in the categories, if we want to look at it, so Euro games, I mentioned Splendor. For me personally, Splendor's a bit dry. It's not my favorite game of that category. My favorite game is a game called Trois. I don't know if I would recommend it as a first game for anyone because it's like if you're relatively familiar, if you've played even one board game in your life, you'd probably pick it up fine. If you've literally never played a board game before, probably not.
So everyone should be okay with it then.
I think so. I don't know if... I feel like most people aren't that stupid that they look at it and go, oh, I'm so confused by this. I think the issue is just experience. So, if you played Monopoly enough times, or Risk or any of these other games, you're probably going to be okay. Even starting off with a relatively mid-weight game right off the bat. You don't have to jump to something low end just because that's what people recommend. But yeah, Seven Wonders is another one that's really popular and is quite a decent game. It is a card game, but it's sort of in that Euro category, card games. And it's very popular, and also a lot of people love it. Another one that's kind of in the category is Pandemic. If you look at the Board Game Geek list, which I'll again mention later, I keep forgetting to mention it. It's number one currently. Pandemic Legacy is currently number one on the best games ever list.
Okay.
From the higher end of Euros, once you sort of do a bit of research, play a few, get quite accustomed to it, there are games on the other end of the spectrum that are much more complex. So, as an example, Madeira that I've already mentioned, it's quite complicated. It's got a lot of moving parts, as Euro games are kind of attributed to a bunch of moving parts together, and you as a player figure out how to get all these moving parts working really well. And that's part of why they often call these games engine-building games. Not literally as in you're building engines, but the points engine is what they're referring to. Another one of my favorites is a game called Manhattan Project, where you are building nuclear bombs.
Okay.
And you have workers, which can be either scientists, engineers, or just contractors, essentially. And you send them out to the board to do stuff for you, collect resources, collect yellow cake, and then build the best nuclear bombs. There's a kind of really cute 50s style art thing happening to it. It makes it all retro, like Cold War-ish. It's actually not a bad first pick, I would say, because it's not super complicated, but it's got enough meat to it that you can play it a whole bunch of times and you'll still like it. I actually often use it as a first example game, even though I think most people will consider it too complex as a first, but as I said, I tend to assume people aren't idiots. In the Ameritrash category, so something like Star Wars Rebellion is really popular at the moment. It is a bit on the more expensive side. It's a two-player, particularly if you're into the Star Wars IP. The way the game works is one player plays the Empire, one player plays the Rebels. The rebels have a secret base on one of the planets. The map is essentially a bunch of the Star Wars planets. The Empire player can build their Star Destroyers and their Death Stars. They can actually blow up planets using a Death Star. If they blow up the planet with the rebel base, they win. Or if they manage to find the rebel base and attack the right planet. And the rebels really are just buying time, slowly fucking things over, kind of going and attacking this bit and jeopardizing this little thing and fucking this over. And you've also got your like traditional heroes, like, so the Empire's got like the Darth Vader and etc. And Grand Moff Tarkin and all that. And then the rebels have Luke and Leia and Chewie and that whole lot. I'm just trying to think of a fucking another American. Well, yeah, the previously mentioned Eldritch Horror, which is a co-op game. Again, just trying to prevent the rise of the Elder Gods from devouring the world, pretty much. There's tons in the category, but they're probably the two I'd mentioned initially. But it's again, I might as well mention it now. So anything you need in terms of resources, there's a website called BoardGameGeek.com. When you first go to that website, you're gonna be like, "The fuck am I looking at?" Because it's a design out of like the 90s. But the site is very robust. It does a lot of. It has basically every board game that has ever come out, like 80,000+ of them listed. The site has a ton of usability to actually find information. But if you say go to a board game that's listed, you will see who published it, what year it came out, what edition it is, how many editions there are. Normally there's rules you can download, there's reviews that they post, and then there's a sub-forum for every single board game on top of that, plus statistics for things like who played it, how many times, who owns it, how many people own it. It's obviously users of the site, but it's a good general chunk of information. It has basically every game fucking listed. So, you can go there as well. War games, there's probably the main recommendation to make is Twilight Struggle. It's on the more complex end. It's again a two-player game where you have it's the Cold War. One side plays the USSR, one side plays the USA. It's actually very thematic, I would say, for a war game, because it makes you feel like you're playing the Cold War. And it is quite complex, but it's not super complex. It's actually not too far removed from something like Risk, or from games. It's probably most similar to the closest classic game to it is Stratego. I don't know if any of you guys have played that.
Many years ago.
Yeah. So it's got that sort of secret information thing happening, but there's a board, you have to take over bits, and you kind of have to figure out a way to bluff your opponent. There's a lot more details in that game I won't go into, but it's a good, particularly for war games, if you're interested in that category at all, which I suspect most people aren't. But if you are, that's a good one, and that's a really popular one. It's readily available, it gets published all the time. Good shit. And miniatures, I don't know if I should even make recommendations.
We'll be here all
Honestly,
night.
something like a Battle Lore would probably be okay because it's all in one box. It's a board game that has miniatures in it that also acts as both an Ameritrash game as well as a war game, and a kind of introduction to war games. It's fantasy based, so you've got like one side that are like the chaos evil dudes and one side that are like nice gaieties, and you just battle each other. If you like that kind of thing, that's probably where you'd probably want to start, because it's, yeah, you don't have to spend as much money on buying miniatures, put them all together, blah 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 blah. If you find that you like that, then you can look at maybe other things. But again, honestly, it's probably a category you'd have to do your own research in. unfortunately. It's not one I can really
Yeah,
make proper recommendations.
Miniatures is a larger sort of outlay and ongoing cost, though, isn't it? Like, it's something that you really want to look into before you just start randomly buying a stack of miniatures.
Yeah.
Because they can
Yeah.
run into a lot of money, those miniatures.
You'd be talking thousands if you're serious, like Mike level serious. You'd be looking at probably thousands and thousands of dollars.
Yes.
If you want to concentrate on one game, you're still probably looking at $400-500
Mm-hmm.
to start. Because if you don't have literally anything, you have to keep money. You have to buy the paints, and the books, the minis themselves, brushes,
Files, the clippers,
all that sort of shit.
glue.
And then you've got to assume that you can actually paint. And
Yep.
That's okay.
I'm not having a go at anyone, but like painting is not something that everyone can do. I have a few minis from when I was playing AD&D from years ago, and I got halfway through painting them and went, you know what, like these look okay, but I'm no painter.
It's alright, I can teach you.
Mike can teach you.
Anyway,
And I guess for the card game, for like not the card games, the social games, there's a lot that's a good category because the games again tend to be cheaper. So it's a good first pick, oftentimes, and it works with large groups really well.
Mm.
If there's a bunch of people that want to play, it's a good one. Resistance, it's essentially like Mafia, or the old Mafia games. Think of them as, if anyone doesn't know what Mafia or a werewolf is, think of them as kind of like Murder in the Dark. That's style. That's something I think nearly everyone's played as a kid.
someone walks around with a flashlight.
Well, in the case of werewolf, sometimes people do that. Because technically
Right.
you play werewolf if, I think the max is 60 people. And there
And they
are
all get a
rules
card.
for werewolf that play 60 people.
Yeah, right.
So I've never done it.
Is that werewolf? Is that more of a? Is that the old LARP game that they had, or is it a different one again?
Well, it works in the same way that the Resistance, you have spies and the Resistance. In Werewolf, you've got werewolves and villagers.
This wasn't Oh, okay, I could be wrong, but wasn't there an offshoot of the the vampire LARP as a werewolf LARP game as well? It's probably not the one I'm thinking of. This one you're talking about.
Live action roleplay, I mean.
Yeah, because you had Vampire the Masquerade, which was a fairly
Oh.
largish old live, LARP game back in the 80s, the 90s and 2000s, and there was an offshoot called Werewolf.
Yeah, that's Werewolf, the Forsaken. No,
Yeah,
not
that
Forsaken.
one. We're not talking about that, are we?
No, well, that's... those aren't really LARPs, though, because, actually, they're just role-playing games. They're just pen and paper role-playing.
Okay.
Because doesn't LARP normally imply that you're running around?
Yes. Yes.
I mean, I guess you can do that, but it'd be kind of hard to facilitate all the, story-based elements.
Yeah. Technically,
Taste.
LARPing you can have just be, say, people sitting around a table, but most the general consumption is, I run around in armor and I hit people with swords.
Yeah.
So
Awesome. That's cool. I just wanted to sort of clarify, so yeah. That's all.
For anyone asking the obvious question of why I didn't put RPGs, it's because they're almost separate categories. So there's board games that have RPG elements. Most
say for
notably-
instance, there's World of Warcraft or the Dungeons and Dragons board game you can get.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
And something like Gloomhaven, which came out very recently.
Yeah, I've got those two games, Aaron, and I just got them for the minis.
Oh, okay. Okay. Lovely.
Yep.
But they're almost their own category. I don't sort of put them together with board games at all.
Okay.
There's actually another website which has it does to role playing games what Board Game Geek does for board games, and it's one of those sites where you can probably find the exact rules for things like car lesbians and all those.
Awesome.
All those ones that came out of random places, which should not be named.
Yeah.
And there is a role-playing game called Car Lesbian.
Nice. We should look into that maybe offline later.
It has only 2 stats for your character: car and hotness.
This is a game I sound like I could get behind.
Yeah.
Nice and easy. But no, it's a pretty good breakdown of your board games, and I guess it's a far cry from the old Monopoly or what's the Cluedo or any of those standard old traditional board games. There's a lot more out there than that these days.
Yeah.
And
I don't want to say that because a lot of board gamers are quite elitist about Monopoly, and I am as well
No.
to some extent. But part of the reason why many board gamers are, so if you ever run into one of those people, part of the reason is simply because the Monopoly games, Monopoly, Cluedo, Risk, all these games, they were designed quite a long time ago, and modern board games have this whole history of design behind them that those games don't. And because they do, that's often why they're better, in quotes. That's not to say there's no place for those games, but that's generally speaking why most people that play modern board games don't pick up Monopoly and Risk. And if they do, it's generally to play with people that aren't familiar with modern board games.
Mm.
Either because they want to get them into it, or because that's the ones they're familiar with and they want to slowly bring them into wide world of insanity that currently exists out there. And there is a lot out there at the moment. It's really hard to be like, start here, because a month later there might be something else. So, but definitely go to Board Game Geek and just look at the lists there. Maybe look at the forums and see what people recommend. As for starters, you will see the same names being repeated. But really, the main thing is to pick something that you're interested in, both the theme and that just sounds interesting to play. Because at the end of the day, if it's just something you're picking up just because someone says you should play this first, but you don't actually like it, sort of defeats the purpose a little bit. That'll be the one thing I'd say. Unfortunately, it does require you to do a bit of your own research, but it's like anything, I guess.
Well, what do you know about Pokemon Go, Aaron?
Ooh, Pokemon Go. Niantic and Nintendo have released the Water Festival update, which is pretty cool. It means that there's a absolute shit ton of water-based Pokemon flopping around at the moment, meaning that if you are still a few Magikarp short of a Gyarados, you should be able to catch enough now to get one. Apparently there's shinies as well, so you can actually get a shiny Magikarp, which is making me very, very excited indeed. It means that once you catch enough Magikarps, if you evolve your shiny, you'll get a red Gyarados instead of a blue one. I'm excited about that. I want a red Gyarados. Because I've got a Pikachu with a party hat and a Pikachu with a Christmas hat.
The whole thing just sounds like...
It's like Malibu Stacy with a brand new hat.
Yeah,
I don't care.
Like,
I don't care at all. I don't care. I want a red Gyarados. And a shiny Magikarp. Anyone else, spend days on the DS trying to catch a shiny? Or is that just me? Surely it's not just me.
Surely it's not just you, but right now it's just
you.
me.
It's you. It's just you. I never really played
Smithers, you're quite good at turning me on.
But anyway, back to the update at hand. So there's a lot of water-based Pokemon that are spawning all over the place. Their drop rates are higher. You'll be able to catch a lot more water-based Pokemon even if you're nowhere near water, which is always a good thing. Also, they've actually now confirmed that every time you do a 7-day streak with the Pokestops, you will now get an evolution item. In the last update, we had evolution items drop, so Metal Coats, King's Rocks, things like that, where you can evolve a normal Pokemon in a completely different direction, or evolve a Pokemon that you're not ordinarily able to evolve. So Onix, the Rock-type Pokemon, if you get a Metal Coat or a Steel Fin, I think it is, you can evolve him into a Steelix. So that's exciting as well. So more features, and confirmed that you will get one evolution item every time you do a 7-day streak on the Pokestops.
Alright.
Almost like a functional game now.
Almost. All we
Not
need is
just the
trading and
Pokemon.
battling, and we'll be right. And hopefully, I don't know, what are they going to go? We've just had Pokemon Sun and Moon. We've done every primary color. So by the time they get to, I don't know, Pokemon Jupiter and Saturn, we might have a functioning mobile Pokemon game, perhaps.
I mean, it's pretty fucking good where it's at, so I don't...
Oh, it's great.
If it stays as is, it wouldn't bother me.
No,
I don't play it really much anymore, but
I do.
like I appreciate it exists.
Mm.
It's worth much more than the quality of the game would suggest.
Absolutely.
Put it that
I mean, this game has been responsible for more nerds getting off more couches all over the world than pretty much anything else. I mean, those nerds are probably back on the couches now, but it did, for a while, get a lot of people
Well, it's nice
moving.
to see not just the nerds get off the couches, but for there to be a move into a genre that hasn't really been properly explored by mainstream stuff.
Yeah.
So my thinking is, even if something can come out that will expand the genre even more, and that's always a good thing.
Absolutely. You know, it's one of the little tentative steps into AR as well, which is really cool. I think rather than VR, AR is probably going to be where it's at in 10 years' time.
Anytime there's some innovation, even if you think it's crap, I feel like it's almost worth celebrating.
Absolutely.
Just on that basis.
Mm.
Just because, like, this is a new direction. There could be something here that's beyond what we currently imagine, which is just... That is actually exciting to think about, regardless of what I think of that actual game.
Yeah. And the fact that you can now get a shiny Magikarp as well.
Yeah. And your hats.
That's... Oh, actually, yes, sorry, I do need to mention one more thing. If you go into Pokemon Go and go into your avatar creation menu or your avatar change-up menu at the moment, you can actually get a Magikarp hat. Basically looks like Magikarp's eating your head. I, for one, am all for it, and my character in-game is currently wearing a Magikarp as a hat, so...
For all you Team Fortress 2 players that really haven't played in a while and really need your
need a hat fix. All
There
we
you
need
go.
to do is stack more than one hat on top of the other. Speaking of Pokemon and hats, shameless plug to a web series I watched not long ago called Starter Squad. It's actually one of the funniest things I've ever seen. It's a piss take of the Pokemon 3 starters. And there's a scene where a Caterpie gets worn as a hat. So I suggest that once you're done with this podcast, jump onto YouTube and actually have a watch of Starter Squad. You won't be disappointed.
You mean people aren't only turning to us for content? Is that a ridiculous suggestion?
Maybe I have
Maybe
an agreement with
audience
the
of
guy
3.
that wrote Starter Squad. No, I don't, actually. I just watched it and thought it was really...
I was gonna ask.
He is the guy who wrote Starter Squad.
I wish I had that many views. No, it's just really funny. There's also a scene where Charmander shanks a Caterpie with the metal stakes. But anyway, moving on. Pokemon Go, it's still relevant. You can now wear a fish as a hat and catch extra fish. 10 out of 10.
Just for the hats.
Just for the hats.
If he was actually reviewing the game, he would be an 11 out of 10.
Well, it'd be a Team Fortress out of 10.
Extra hat.
Extra hat. Awesome. Alright. Mike!
Yeah.
Yeah, you had...
I thought I'd talk about the X-Men game, which is the couple of X-Men Origin things. You've got the Deadpool game and the Wolverine game. You're considering that you brought out Deadpool movie a while back, and Logan has come out recently, which is the final chapter in the Logan movie series. Thought we'd bring out these little 2 games. These are fairly kind of oldish games. 2009, I believe, a Wolverine came out. I think it was either 2009. Originally, the funny fact was Deadpool was already out for a while, and then as the movie came out, they just rehashed it with a new cover and said, "Oh, it's the game like the movie," which wasn't. But
it actually got pulled from Steam for quite a while. There was some licensing issues as well.
Yeah, and so they thought, "Oh, wait a minute," and then re-put it up there. So I've played these both on Xbox 360. Not too bad of games. Your Wolverine is, basically with the first Wolverine, the Origins film, that tells the story of him going through, say, in the movie where he he's doing the flashbacks of everything like that, and where he's doing in Africa. So it does a bit like that. Fun, cool little mechanics where you can do your hack and slash. You can do a spinning top with your claws out, and you've got your health regenerates over time, and yada yada yada. The storyline is very basic, very simple. Just go through, do this, do that, kill this person, kill everybody on the level. That's usual hack and slash.
Very compelling.
Very compelling. Well, it was. You can do some collectible items as well in the game, actually. You can try and collect, funny enough, little figurines of yourself that may have, the typical comic book costumes and whatnot. The game does have your characters from the film. Unfortunately, not with the same actors and whatnot. However, you've got different bosses and this, that, and the other. So it's very much based off the movie, but with the comic book characters throughout. Now, jumping across to Deadpool, actually does have Wolverine in it for a little cameo where he gets knocked out and then slapped around by Deadpool for a bit.
It's one of the greatest gaming scenes ever, that scene.
Yeah. And he just is like, Wolvie, slap, 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 slap. Deadpool was quite a fun game to get into. But actually, in the style of Deadpool, where the fourth person, he mocks you when you die. So you fail at a level and he's like, really? You're fucking useless, Or it's like, you douchebag. And so he'll talk to you and he'll have his little voices in his head as he goes throughout the game. Again, similar mechanic to Wolverine, where it's just hack and slash and shooting.
And he rewrites the script at one point in the game as well,
Yes.
doesn't he? Yeah.
Well, he's like, the game storyline is he's wanting to make a game of himself in the game, and the budget of the Dark Moon or whatever it was called, Full Moon or whatever, the company has said, yeah, no, we've blown all the budget on this first part of the thing. So they kind of, a fun little skit there is where it turns into like a 2D, like 82-bit graphic game where he just walks and looks like in a top view, and so it's very a fun, cheeky game. It's like so very much Deadpool style. There's you get Rogue in there, and you get Domino, get a couple of female characters, and he kind of like stares at her boobs and goes, "What? Sorry, I wasn't paying attention," and then goes back to the character. So it's quite a fun game. It's just very cheeky and very, very good how it kind of ties in with the movie, that it's that persona of Deadpool. Merc with a mouth, doesn't shut up. The villain in the Deadpool is actually Mr. Sinister, master of cloning in the comics. So, and you have Cable in there as well. So people who've watched the film and then they hear the Deadpool film and they go, oh, who's Cable? They can actually play the game and find out a bit more about Cable. So yeah, Cable's
one of my
cool.
favorite characters when I randomly started reading X-Force.
Right, yep.
When I was a kid, I think I bought like a random edition when I was in a comic shop, and it was the first time I'd ever met Cable as a character.
Yeah.
I don't know, as a kid he seemed fucking awesome. I think in retrospect, maybe that was just dumb kid eyes, but...
No, Cable's always been cool.
What's his, his actual power is a bit confusing, but I remember in the comic, they had a moment where he did like his super acrobatics and used the blood of like his opponents to do some kind of psychic attack. Is that
I'm
possible?
not overly sure. I know he's from the future. I know he's one of the New Mutants.
The daughter, the son of Cyclops and I believe Jean Grey, who is from the future. And one of the storylines that I first got introduced to Cable was where he was saving a daughter, like a baby girl, from I think one of another different type of mutant, when all the other mutants have been killed off, and then they're all hunting him. So it was quite a confusing storyline.
Okay.
what's his actual powers?
So he's telepathic and telekinetic, being the daughter of being the son. Oh god, if you ever heard me calling the daughter, into my ass. Being the son of Jean Grey, that's fairly evident. But apparently, his abilities allow him to bond with the cybernetic bits of him. So he's got some
cybernetic eye and arm.
Yeah.
Bits of his leg and stuff like that.
Yeah, and he also has a weapon called a scimitar, or scimitar, which is powered by, well, no, it's spelled Psy, MITR.
Ah.
So, you know, those good old comic book play on words, which he powers with his telepathic abilities, apparently.
Cool.
Yeah.
It is telepathic.
And
Yeah.
he's always been drawn to be a very large, muscly man.
But he's also...
He
he's
came
also,
out of the 90s, right? So he was drawn
Yeah.
by primarily... Who's the guy that's famously now laughed at for his terrible art style that came out of the 90s?
It's not Frank Miller, is it?
No, don't you dare.
No.
Okay, I'm just checking.
Frank Miller
Just
is a
checking.
I mean, his
Just checking
stories
it.
suck, but his...
Yeah, well, here and there. So, well, anywho, that doesn't. Yeah, barring that. Yeah, the games are. Well, Deadpool is a fairly replayable game where you kind of just have a bit of fun with it. Wolverine's more of a once-off film game, and they usually like most. How would you say movie games are quite terrible because they're just trying to get it out as quick as they can and make a quick buck. One case in point was like one of the Spider-Man games. They got really bad reviews because it was just out and it was terrible. And I think another one was like a Superman game.
Oh, Superman 64.
Yeah, something or other.
It's like it's
I
got
mean,
like a score of 3 on Metacritic or
That's-
something. It's
Yeah, it was just
considered one of the worst games of all time.
Yeah,
right
well,
up there with
that's
E.T.
E.T.
Well,
Yeah.
funnily enough,
Yeah.
another movie tie-in.
right.
But if I may digress, oh look, I got a Lapras. Sorry, I've got Pokemon Go going on my desk. Finally caught a Lapras. Go me with the
Yeah, but it's
fish
fine.
hat.
Everyone's catching him.
I don't care. I've got a Lapras now. Sorry, shitty games. As
Oh,
every-
Rob, sorry, Rob Liefeld. That's
Okay.
yeah, so he's notorious for having weird proportions and bizarre art. He can't draw legs, feet specifically, so all his poses tend to minimize feet and hands. And he loves pouches, so he just shoves pouches everywhere.
pouches are cool. You can carry things in pouches.
I know, but just look at some of his art. just Google his name, and if you should see like a top 40 worst Rob Liefeld, and just look at it. Just stare at its majestic horribleness.
Nice. Anyway, as I was going to say before we were interrupted by Pokemon, shitty games. As everyone knows, I'm the retro game person here, and I do enjoy my older school games. One of the most universally panned NES games was the X-Men game on the Nintendo Entertainment System. And it was absolutely terrible. It was one of the first games to feature the escort mission mechanic, if you will, where in so much of the fact you had to play with a computer-driven second character, and you could not play the game without them. You got to be select between 4 X-Men. There was Beast, Cyclops, Wolverine, and... oh, who was the other one? Maybe Storm. There was 2 that punched and 2 that had lasers.
Had lasers?
Well, lightning.
Electricity.
Yeah.
I feel like Storm's always so under. Like, is she considered a mega level?
I don't know.
I think in some
Fucking
parts
should be.
in the start of the comics she wasn't, but then some series of comics she gets enhanced. So it's a myriad of answers there where you could go, well, in this comic book she's fantastic, and then this one she's okay, and then in the movie she's fucking played by crappy Halle Berry.
She has one of the weirdest
very
lines
fun.
ever. What happens to a frog when it gets hit
she's-
by lightning? Like, what the fuck
Yeah,
was that all
exactly.
about?
And their haircut. She just
They thought it
let's
was cool. That line was
save this for another podcast. Let's save it for another podcast.
Anyway,
I
back
thought that thinking it was going to be cool.
No.
that the NES game, X-Men game, was horrible, where you actually actively tried to get your teammate killed because they ended up usually getting stuck behind a piece of scenery going back and forth and just firing their laser. And Wolverine was totally useless. He had a hitbox of about 3 pixels in front of him, and he kind of made this horrible like hip gyration animation when he tried to hit stuff, and you couldn't hit anything, and you ended up taking damage the whole time. It didn't get any better for the second game, which turned into a side scroller. The first game was a top down, made by a company called LJN, which were notorious for pumping out crap games.
I don't know. Sounds amazing.
Yeah,
might
yeah.
pick it up.
If you've got an emulator, you should definitely look into it. Also, look into the Angry Video Game Nerds video on the X-Men games. You won't be disappointed. Check him
Well,
out on
my
YouTube.
favorite game, famously, is Superman 64.
Superman 64, yeah. Actually, a cart that's worth a little bit of money these days if you have it, simply because it is so poo. Which is
One game I actually don't mind is Punisher. I'm not sure if any of you have played it, but the game Punisher, which wasn't truly based off the Thomas Jane version of Punisher.
Was it just the fighting one where you just went from left to right, beating everyone up?
This was a shooting one, third person, and it was considered on the banding listing of the criteria because it involved torture of the criminals. So, say for instance, you're running around. A cool little mechanic was you shoot enough bad guys, and if, let's say one scene is
torture one.
Yeah, pretty much. You had several choices. So, say for instance, one scene you're infiltrating like this mafia's funeral in the coffin, and you're in the coffin and you hear the people talking. This guy weighs a ton. I don't remember him weighing a ton. He's so heavy. Okay, put him down, and then it's like you do a little parted. He's like showtime. Pops up, pulls out an M60, goes. Brrr, you shoot everybody, and let's say you leave one guy alive. He goes, don't kill me. And then you go, come here. So you take him to a coffin, you put his head between the coffin and the lid, and you slam his head. And he goes, I'm not going to tell you nothing. And you go, you're going to tell me what I want to know. And he's like, slams it. And so you're using with your mouse, or console, joystick, what have you, to determine the length and strength of the hitting. And if you have a bar that goes when he breaks, and so if you do it well enough and proper enough and don't kill him or don't kill him, he'll squeal like a pig. And then there are different things like you can shove people into mulches, you can feed them to sharks, you can...
Really selling gamers is like these mature people that really need an R-rated game.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. Like you could do simple torture things where you'd be like, well, let's call them interrogation techniques. You'd have, say, 4 simple mechanics where one would be a face stomp, fist to the face, gun, tension, and I think it's just choking.
It's American style torture.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, it's very similar to the Sopranos game. You get to do a lot of that in the Sopranos game as well.
Yeah. So it was. It's not too bad. I
for one, thoroughly endorse it. It sounds awesome. I'm going to go and look it up.
Yeah. Have a look. Have a play. I think it used Thomas Jane for the voice, but he was my favourite Punisher from the movie.
He did beat a bunch of people up with a wine bottle.
Yeah.
Oh, it was a whiskey bottle.
Yeah, that was a little short. I'm guessing you've seen it or you read about it or what?
I've seen
Yeah,
it.
that was quite cool. It's a shame he didn't continue on with the Punisher because what was his name? Ray Johnson or whatever his name was. He wasn't. I didn't really rate him that well.
What, in the Hollywood movie?
Yeah, in the secondary, the Warzone.
Punisher Warzone, no.
Yeah.
No, the first one was much better because the Punisher toileted someone to death. I love that scene where he beats the dude up with a toilet. I thought that was the epitome of just awesomeness. And I'm going to smash your face in fucking toilet.
Well, that's right. And you had the Russian, the big Russian.
The big Russian, yeah.
Yeah,
that was a great movie.
And actually, in the Punisher, it does a bit of cameo from. You have Black Widow, Nick Fury, Iron Man. Who else is there?
Bob.
Bob. There's always a Bob somewhere. You throw him out the window or something.
Oh, you mean Bob from Hydra?
Oh, maybe. Who knows? Well, not really Hydra.
No, Deadpool's mate.
Yeah, Deadpool's mate, yeah. So, yeah, there are good games that are based on movies, and there are
absolutely
a heck of a lot of terrible ones.
I mean, some of the best X-Men games are the X-Men Capcom games, the fighting games.
Fighting games.
They're amazing. Right. I'm a big Street Fighter fan, and I love my X-Men versus Street Fighter or Capcom versus X-Men.
Yeah.
They are, if you've got an epileptic streak in your family, don't go near those games. They are like the super mega hyper seizure games and tagging in and out, and the game's over in 30 seconds, but you're like, yeah, that was awesome. I just kicked Spider-Man's ass.
I love that.
Yeah, they are really good games, and
they beat up Cyclops.
They've been churning them out for years, and there seems to be no respite, which is not a bad thing.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining us in the soap, or at the soap, or with the soap. Use one of
On the
those. I
soap,
don't
using
know.
the soap,
In the soap, with the soap,
eating the soap.
eating the soap.
Us, the soap.
Yum, yum, yum.